So, could you please introduce yourself and the organization you work with?
I'll go. You want me to go first, Graham?
Sure.
So I'm Trudy Shimka, and I work with the Bloom Group Community Services. We're an umbrella agency in the downtown east side.
I'm Graham Wood. I work with Trudy at the Bloom Group Community Services Society. My role there is Director of Real Estate, which sort of captures, I think, what I do. It's hard to judge a title, though. So, yeah, that's where I work.
Could you both just expand a little more about your roles?
Mm-hmm. So I'm the Associate Executive Director, and mostly what my role is overseeing direct service delivery. So all our service program managers, most of them report to me, and so I would help support their work with staff and clients, and also look at organizational development in terms of solving problems together or creating new initiatives. And then I function as part of the executive team with Graham and others, and we sort of try to set the strategic direction and make bigger decisions about the organization.
That's cool.
For myself, I think the role evolved prior to me getting to Bloom with Director of Facilities, which is still effectively what my job is. So the facilities we operate, approximately 11 of them. I say approximately because in some buildings we have 2 general programs, and we do everything from, and this is going to sound broad, and it is. So women fleeing violence. So we have a shelter in the downtown east side. Support services and transitional housing for women. Our hospice, which is first of its kind. It's just celebrated its 30th year in the downtown east side. So hospice is end-of-life care. We have affordable housing programs for many vulnerable individuals, seniors in the West End, people in the downtown east side, and mental health supported services. So yeah, it runs a lot of we serve a lot of people. In addition to sort of those housing portfolios, we also run an AG program. And the AG program is, the initials are for adult guardianship, so that financially vulnerable adults that are, for various ways, have capacity issues and look after, help them. And so from my perspective, I'm supporting the organization in the sense of making sure our facilities run effectively, to continue those programs and look for areas of growth, expand housing services out. We're always on the lookout for more family housing for our women, and it's very difficult. But so it's sort of that stream is maintaining our current portfolio, making sure it's operating effectively, and looking for opportunities to expand our.
Thank you for sharing that.
I guess I can ask you the next question. What inspired you to join the Bloom Group specifically?
Trudy, do you want to?
I never know who's going to go first.
Let's just start. Trudy goes first, and I'll go second. How about
okay,
the question?
let's do that.
Just because it makes it easier for me, so that's better.
Okay. So what inspired me to join the Bloom Group? Actually, I started from a recreation background, working with children and youth, children in recreation and education, and youth in leadership development. And I guess I recognized that there was a real gap, that there were kids and youth who were getting services and those that weren't. So I've been at the Bloom Group for 27 years, so this is a long time ago, and so I wanted to work in the shelter to try and provide supports to children and youth, and through that also support their mothers to manage family in crisis. So that's what inspired me to get started with the Bloom Group, and clearly it has remained inspiring because my job has changed many times, but I still enjoy the impact that we make for the people we serve.
Yeah, for me, and what I guess inspired me with the Bloom Group was, I guess my own history is real estate is kind of my entire career. I've worked in the private and public sector forever. So both sort of spectrums. And what directly for me is right before I joined the Bloom Group, I was working as a consultant for First Nations groups. And I was doing a lot of work for the Tahltan Nation, and the Tahltan Nation is located in Dees Lake in far northern BC. And they had difficulty on reserve and in the community about building housing for members of the community. And not only that, there was, and they'll get really technical here, but about 4 or 5 years previously, there was what was called the BC Nonprofit Asset Transfer Program, and that's where community housing was sold in a way to organizations like the Bloom Group and others. Bloom Group wasn't involved up there, but what had occurred to them far up north is an inability to actually properly service the community, provide housing for the members. The houses were there, the supports were not. So that's part of it, and that got my interest in housing. And for the Bloom Group, it was a lot of travel for me, and I introduced you to my son. So part of it was making sure I didn't have to travel as much and kind of did the same work I was doing. So the good news is, I knock on wood, the Dees Lake thing all came to fruition. But since then, moving into Bloom, a lot of the same issues that I saw up there and around the province and the nation with Indigenous groups reflected in the nonprofit area. So yeah, that's inspiring to get into Bloom, and there's all endless possibilities, and it's difficult work, and it's so far it's been really fun.
I think that's very honorable of you both. Why does the Bloom Group specialize in women's shelters? Would you say women are the most vulnerable while homeless?
That's a really good question. Women in homelessness and women with children in homelessness are extremely vulnerable. Physical safety, economic safety. For women with children, the concern of losing custody of their children because they can't meet their needs due to poverty. So I wouldn't say though that they're the most vulnerable, because there are many highly vulnerable groups in the homeless sector, and any group that already has marginalization, whether it's race, culture, economic access to education, for the Indigenous community, historical impacts of colonization, and the residential schools, like any layer that you add on increases your vulnerability. The LGBTQ community, they're all highly vulnerable. So why did the Bloom Group focus on women? So 60 years ago, there were no women-specific emergency shelters. So if a woman went into an emergency shelter, she would be in a mixed population, which is risky. It's not necessarily safe, but also it created a barrier that women wouldn't come into services. So that risk was not manageable for them. So they might couch surf or stay in an unsafe relationship. Some of the women we work with, and even then, would trade sex or work in the sex trade economy to survive, to avoid coming into services. So creating a women-only service was the inspiration actually of our founder, Meg Guttridge, and she just determined that we needed to create a women-only safe space. And 60 years later, there's only more demand for it than there was then. So
yeah, I think that's really great. Thank you.
I can't answer more than what Trudy did, and I would like to point out that I look at myself as a privileged white male. So yeah, I defer completely to Trudy in the programming, and wherever I can support them, I will. So that's a tough one for me to answer. I can't answer.
why is it important to discuss homelessness in the community and bring awareness to the idea of homelessness?
That's a big question. I mean, I think some of the things that come to mind for me, one is that homeless people tend to be invisible. So we only really pay attention if we have encampments that make us uncomfortable, or we feel uncomfortable about people begging on the street, or we attribute, increases in crime and other undesirable activities in our neighborhood, as they're called, to a homeless population. So we usually tend to pay attention when it's about the negative. And I think it's, we need to think about raising the profile of homeless as just part of our community who experience barriers for multiple reasons, and to try and remove the stigma, like understanding the root causes of homelessness and educating ourselves around that will help to point us towards what the solutions might be.
Yeah. How do you follow that up, Trudy? I'm sorry.
Maybe we should switch partway.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You're asking the right person these questions when they go to Trudy and you're asking about this. Like, the wealth of knowledge is unbelievable. But the simple fact, I think, that you guys are asking these questions is part of it. So it's a reflection back to you. So if we do, but here I am. Whether it's stigma or anything else, having these conversations, trying to understand some of the reasons is the biggest part of the battle, and you're doing that. Yeah, you're answering your own question in a way.
Thank you. So going back to the point about stigma, like, how do you think we can lessen that?
I'm gonna try first on this one. Otherwise, I won't have anything to say. But it feels a bit like a continuation of that first question. But how do you reduce stigma? Accepting, I think, in my mind, that everyone is part of a community and everyone is different, and people aren't going to come from the same background. They're not going to have the same reasons, and you can't paint everybody with the same brush. So again, you guys are asking those questions. I think that's the start. But just taking that step back and empathy. People. I don't think there may be a very slim minority of people who choose to be homeless, like literally, but I don't think it's a choice that people make. I think it's a environmental, it could be their history, there could be trauma, maybe, mental health issues. There could be a whole bunch of that, and not just one. There may be layers and layers of that. So how do you end the stigma? Looking at those root causes, exactly what Trudy was saying before, and explaining, not even explaining them, just looking at them and going, okay, there's an issue. Let's try and do something about it. And even having that conversation is trying. So, yeah.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, that is a good answer, Graham. I think part of the way, just to echo what Graham was saying about empathy, but it's just recognizing the humanity of people. Like, we all fundamentally, we're all humans, and just trying to find those places of sameness. What are our commonalities? And sometimes I think the stigma, it grows out of fear. So a lot of people who are homeless struggle with mental wellness, and that can be very frightening when we don't understand some of the behaviors or the look of that. Some people struggle with addictions, and sometimes that can cause behaviors that might be uncomfortable or even seem threatening sometimes. So I think when we start to understand some of those, as Graham was saying, some of those underlying things that can bring a person to that place of being homeless. It's not like people who aren't homeless don't have the same challenges, but they have different resources to bring to it. So they might have different access to treatments, or even just the privacy of their own home to go through their struggles reduces the stigma that they experience. So recognizing that what those commonalities are, trying to understand what some of those challenges are, so they're not as frightening, because they can be frightened. I mean, they can be frightening for us, some of the unpredictability or lack of understanding around it. So I really think that you guys are on the right track, like education, trying to understand and share that knowledge. That will go a long way to remove the stigma.
Can I add one small point that I was just thinking of when Trudy was talking there, and I apologize, Trudy. But another way to address the stigma is sometimes, what is the stigma? And I've heard a lot of people talk about the cost of providing services like the services Bloom Group provides, and go, you know what, it's too much. They're handouts. They're, you know, and you get the old go get a job type of folk. So if that's the argument, or if the stigma is a financial or an economic stigma, is addressing that too, and going, well, the flip of that is, and it gets a little more technical, but the flip of that is, but for organizations like the Bloom Group, what would the costs of homelessness be? Would there be a rise in crime? Would there be a lot of other things? So I would be a proponent in saying social service organizations are actually reducing those costs. So there's the other, it depends on what stigma you're asking about here. But there's the other side, is really exploring and understanding that, you know, the work that our organizations do, and Bloom, and it's been around about 60 years coming up. Interview us in about a year for our 60th anniversary. But it's that is, you know, people may not want to hear the empathy side of it, but if you put it in numbers, for some people that speaks volumes, and whether that's unfortunate or not, that's just the audience that you have to speak to.
That's a really good point. We were more thinking just like, I guess, people being scared, because that's what we hear the most about. But I feel like for some people, like maybe the older generation, it's about the numbers more. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's a really good point, that sometimes it's economic and sometimes it's more emotional, but under putting all those things together will help.
Yeah, I think this is a good transition into my next question, which is there anything the media is leaving out or censoring about the homeless situation in Vancouver?
Well, one good thing about Vancouver is that we have a very high profile on the homeless situation. I think that a lot of times, like any kind of news, the focus is on the crisis as opposed to more the solutions, or the human stories behind the crisis, like who the people are, which also speaks to the stigma. But I think internationally, even the story that we're missing is the human rights story, like the right to access safe, affordable housing, because we place so much investment in housing, like who controls the investments of housing, who can get into the investment in housing, what we call the commodification of housing, takes it out of the human rights realm. And so when we focus our discussions on the economy of housing, creating affordable housing, how much housing is worth, it's missing that whole basic human rights story about that we all have a right for a safe place to live, and that actually this overdependence on housing as an investment creates that disparity at the bottom end of the market. So I think we don't talk enough about that.
Okay, that was very helpful. Overall, what impact do you think the Bloom Group has made just on homeless people?
You can go first, Graham.
Yeah, I guess that question can be split into the individual and the community. You know, and for every individual, and you know, I temper this a bit because I've only been with the Bloom Group for a little over 2 years, so I may not know many of those really individual stories. But the impacts are at the individual level, the family level, like when we speak women and children's, like that family. And it's sort of across the people that we're serving. So there's the individual ones, and I'm sure Trudy would probably have specific stories there that are much better than mine. But at the community level, it's being an advocate, really, and just getting that out there. So the impact is really in the services we provide and the advocacy, sort of that general. Even having these discussions, I think it's amazing that you guys are reaching out, and whether it's our organization or anyone else's, you're taking that opportunity, and hopefully we're responding in kind.
Yeah, Graham's exactly right. The impact is both on the individuals and on the community, hopefully influencing communities, governments, initiatives. So we have staff that sit on local, national, and international advisory groups that are addressing some of these issues. So they use their experience and knowledge from being on the front line to try and influence systems and improve overall our approach around the issues of poverty and marginalization and homelessness, all of those. So that's on the big scale how we try to influence, and Graham's work in real estate at a community level, trying to influence the opportunity to access a safe space, an affordable space that, people can get into, but also that we as an agency can set that up in a way that we can manage it to create security that's not just today, but we want to set a model that in 60 years, that housing we built, people will still be living in it and still be safe and respectfully housed. So that's a community level. But, I think most importantly, what draws all of us to work is the individual level, that person that you meet in crisis, and you might not be able to solve the crisis in every case or change their life situation in a big way, but just that meeting someone face to face with respect and giving them dignity and opportunity to really sleep a safe night, have something to eat, and have a shower, that's immeasurable, the impact on the individual. And hopefully sets them up to make those bigger changes. I can think of an example of a family, a mom with kids that we worked with, and she had lost custody of her kids to the ministry because the abusive partner she was with had created a living environment that wasn't safe for the kids. So they took the kids to be safe, which was the right decision at the time, but a devastating decision for a mother to have to deal with. And she came into our shelter. And so we have a support worker that works with her to set herself up independently, so she's not dependent on that partner. So finding a transitional housing unit with us, and then working with a family support worker to help her meet with the ministry to build their confidence to return her children to her, and then support her in the transition, having her children come back. It's a very tumultuous time for a family. The kids have feelings about having been away. They might have resentments towards mom, and they need to grow back together as a family. So having that network of support. And then she was able to go back to school, and we were able to help support her through affordable housing and helping her with setting up childcare so that she could go back to school. Just reclaiming the life that she probably in the beginning imagined was going to be her family life anyways. And so that kind of opportunity is rare. Every client we see doesn't go through a whole recovery model like that, but even touching them at any point in their journey, I think makes a difference, as long as we can do it with respect and caring.
That was really sweet. I'm glad it worked out for her.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories about how we can actually change the path of people's lives.
I can move on. Do you think homelessness is an issue that can be solved, especially given your experience in real estate and the real estate market in Vancouver? This question is more towards Graham than it is to Trudy.
Yeah, I don't know anything about real estate.
Okay. Are you asking, can homelessness be solved by real estate?
Well, I guess we can split this question up into two parts. First of all, do you think the issue of homelessness can be solved?
Do I think it can be solved, or I hope it can be solved?
That is the question.
It's a great question. Like, anything can be solved. But that goes back to a couple earlier responses, is to solve homelessness is not really understanding those root causes. It's getting to the why is the individual homeless. I think your question's more community based. Like, is there a community solution to homelessness? Potentially, but there's multitudes of individual solutions to different situations. Can real estate play a part maybe in that? I would think so, but I hesitate to say it's on the supply side, because it's on the demand side, and this is coming from an economic lens. Real estate, if it's open to people in the way that they need it, could help. If it's simply just housing for housing's sake, okay, but you're not attacking the issues, or you're not solving those underlying issues. So homelessness isn't just something that's solved with a roof over your head. I'll make this a little simpler. I think homelessness is a complex issue that you really have to dive into. I think that's the first part of your question. I may have gone on a little bit of a deviation.
Oh, that was very helpful.
Yeah, you answered my question really well.
But like, would you say it's even possible in Vancouver, just because the housing prices are so high, and even people with like really like regular professional jobs are struggling to,
No, and I mean no disrespect here, but it's almost a defeatist way of putting the question. Like, is it solvable? Hold on. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a little perplexed. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I would go on a bit of a rant. Like, I think it's just a bit of a backwards way of looking at it. I don't know if that helps you.
Okay. Oh yeah.
I think the most important thing, and I think Graham's being modest because his rants tend to be very illuminating, but I think it's, first you have to build the will. Like, there has to be the will and the investment. There's no reason that people shouldn't be able to live in the city that they work in, go to school in. And you just have to create that will and change makers. Like, you guys are the future change makers. If you decide, you and your friends and the people that you will work with, you'll decide, and anything's possible. I really believe that.
Yeah, thanks, Trudy. And maybe the way of me flipping that then is, can we afford not to solve it?
Yeah.
Maybe there's your question. It's not can we solve it, can we afford not to? And that takes exactly what Trudy was saying to you guys. The work you're doing, it's empathy, it's understanding, and it's a will to do it, and not judgmental. I think that's the other bit there is, people have different reasons for living the lives they do, and be okay with that, and less real estate, more people.
Okay. Those are all the questions we have for today. Thank you so much.